Chapter 37. A necklace rimmed in silver, and the word ladder is silver, solver, solder, boulder. Elizabeth, Freddie, Norbridge, and Leona stayed up until 3 in the morning talking. Norbridge had to leave twice to check on the New Year's Eve party and confer with Jackson, but aside from those brief departures, he remained with the other three, and they discussed the events of the evening, the chain of events of the previous 2 weeks, and, most amazingly to Elizabeth, the facts of her connection to Winifred and Norbridge and Winterhouse. It was a long conversation, as Norbridge first asked Elizabeth to walk him through the steps that had led to the events in the library. She'd shared pieces of it with him briefly right after she'd fled from Selina in the portrait gallery that afternoon. But now she fleshed it out and explained the final pieces about the silver letters and decoding the message and seeing the portrait of Winnie with the necklace. "But what made you try the word faith?" Freddie said. Elizabeth shook her head. "I don't know. It just felt right all of a sudden, like an intuition." She drew out the pendant once again and glanced at it before holding it up for view. "There were the silver letters in the book, which got me thinking, and I finally realized they were spelling out, 'The key is around your neck.' Plus, something clicked for me about the symbol of the key, and it made me think of key word, and I just felt like I should try it out." Norbridge pointed to the necklace. "My grandfather Nestor gave that to my grandmother, Lavina, and then it was passed down to my mother, Rowena, and from her to Maria, and then Winifred. The word's also on the puzzle in the lobby, you know," Elizabeth said. "But in another language. I think that stayed in the back of my mind, too. The whole thing was sort of like solving a crossword puzzle. It just suddenly seemed to fit." "How did the book end up on the floor, though?" Freddie said. "I still don't get that." Elizabeth had been vague on this point. She wasn't sure how much to reveal about the feeling and how she had developed the ability to make things move. "Gracella bumped it when she turned around, perhaps," Norbridge said very quickly, so quickly that only Elizabeth noticed and that he gave her a wink. "Everything happened so fast," she said. "I guess she bumped it. I don't know." Before Freddie could ask anything more, Elizabeth said, "The main thing is I'm sorry I didn't tell all of you about the book right away and then return it when I said I would. I don't know what I was thinking." "Put it out of your mind," Leona said. "I believe Gracella's power was very strong, and at points along the way her influence got to you, even though you tried to resist. I think she even caused you to shout her name out somehow. At least that's my take on things, but I wouldn't berate yourself over any of it." Leona glanced around the room. "But where is it now?" "The book?" Norbridge said, and Leona nodded. He looked to Elizabeth. "Why don't you explain?" "I put it back where I found it," Elizabeth said. "We decided that was the best thing to do." "I didn't watch," Norbridge said. "I don't want to know where it is." It had felt strange to Elizabeth to climb back up the ladder in the reference room and drop the book behind the row of books on its top shelf, but that's exactly what she had done once Jackson and 3 others took Gracella's lifeless body to the mortuary in the nearby town of Havenworth, and she and Norbridge had conferred about what to do next. As she stood by herself and held the book there had been a moment in which she considered just how incredible it was that the slim volume, not 30 minutes before, had been at the heart of such terrible events. It was so unassuming, with such a dull cover. She'd spoken a few magical words while holding it, and now it felt inert, merely a simple book. "I hope it stays there and no one finds it," she had thought, "forever." "Probably for the best," Leona said. "We can only count our lucky stars that Gracella wasn't able to use its power." "No thanks to the Himeses," Norbridge said. "We never even knew Gracella had a daughter, first of all. But to think of Selina and her husband engaged in all their scheming as well as looking after Gracella's body for years?" He gave a little shiver of disgust with his shoulders. "That is really creepy," Freddie said. Elizabeth thought back to that moment when she had stood beside the crate and tried to open it. She closed her eyes. "Don't talk about it," she said. "What about the Himeses?" Freddie said. "Did anyone see them tonight?" "They're gone," Norbridge said flatly. "What do you mean?" Elizabeth said. "That's the first thing I looked into after we left the library," Norbridge said. "I had Jackson and 2 others go to their room right away. Gone. Cleared out. They've disappeared." "That's not good," Freddie said. "Norbridge, I've been wondering," Elizabeth began, and then allowed her sentence to trail off. She wanted to ask more about the Himeses before the subject was left behind. The thought that they might be connected to Riley Granger, or perhaps even related to him, was something that she had been contemplating ever since she'd uncovered the secrets of Marcus's signature on the card he'd given her. Now, though, with Gracella defeated and the Himeses no longer a threat, she thought it likely that there was nothing to her suspicions and resolved to let them go. Yes, Norbridge said, waiting for Elizabeth to continue. I've been wondering this whole time why you wanted me to check in with you each day. Was there something you noticed? Like I resembled Winnie in some way, or you felt we were connected? Norbridge furrowed his brow. I knew there was something. That's the only way I can explain it. I just knew there was something. You've hardly answered her question, Leona said. There's a difference between knowing something and just having a funny feeling. Miss Springer is unwilling to be deferential, even on a night like this, Norbridge said, and they all began to laugh. But enough of all that, he pointed to Elizabeth again. I want to tell you about your mother. For the next hour, both Norbridge and Leona told Elizabeth all about Winnie, detouring whenever Elizabeth asked a question or when some memory arose that they wanted to detail. They started from Winnie's earliest years and worked their way up. How she'd been the gem of the hotel, a bright and eager girl who loved books and swimming and skiing and everything about the life of Winterhouse. Elizabeth felt thrilled throughout, as though she discovered her mother's diary or stumbled upon some old home videos and was finally conjuring her mother to life in some degree. As Norbridge and Leona spoke, Elizabeth kept thinking that when she'd arrived at Winterhouse over 2 weeks earlier, all she'd known was that her mother and father had died 7 years before now. And she was sitting with her grandfather and hearing stories about her mother's life from the very start. It seemed like a miracle. But why did she leave Winterhouse? Elizabeth said after Norbridge made a brief mention of Winnie's departure. I can't understand why anyone would ever want to leave here. Norbridge dropped his eyes to the floor. I made one mistake, he said. I told your mother about the book when she was about 12 or 13, and she took it very seriously, much more seriously than I would have ever thought. I think from that point on she felt there was some curse on her, as though it was her fate, or the fate of any child she had, to find the thing or be in some sort of peril over it. I told her it was just a legend, but the story seemed to frighten her beyond anything I could have ever imagined. As she got older, she expressed deep worries to me about it, explained that she couldn't see living here, much less starting a family and exposing others to any danger, and so she left. One day when she was 18, Winifred was just gone. She left a note explaining herself, saying she was heading somewhere where it never snowed and never got cold, and where she could be far away from the dangers of Winterhouse. She told me she was even changing her name. Didn't want me to be able to track her down. She said it was just best for all of us, for Winterhouse, and that someday, when the threat of danger had passed, she would come back. I never really understood any of it, but what could I do? And you don't know what happened to her after she left, Elizabeth said? You have to understand that I lost track of Winifred completely, Norbridge said. She wanted it that way. Only wrote me a few times the first year or two after she left. I always believed that someday she would reach back out to me, but she kept me in the dark. I don't know anything about the man she married, your father, and I didn't even know you existed, though somehow you must have ended up with your father's relatives. I heard from a couple of reliable sources who thought Winifred had been killed in a car accident years ago, but I never found any information about it. I intend to trace the thread now and find out for myself what happened by talking to your aunt and uncle, but the fact is she disappeared so completely I didn't know a thing about you. Elizabeth had no more questions in her. She thought of her mother's fear and of what led her to leave Winterhouse, but it was all so confusing and sad that she couldn't put it together. All she knew was she wanted to learn as much as she could about her mother, her father too, if possible. And now that she was at Winterhouse, she would be able to. Freddie was asleep, so was Leona. The fire had settled to embers and was quiet. Norbridge, Elizabeth said softly, you have some genuine magic about you, don't you? He glanced at Freddie as if to make certain he was asleep. And so do you, Elizabeth. Something happened to me here over the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure what it is, but something happened. You're a member of the Falls family. It's not surprising to me in any way. She yawned. As much as she wanted to learn more, exhaustion was overwhelming her. It's been a very, very long night, Norbridge said. We'll have a few days to sort everything out and talk more, but for now you should get some sleep. And then when the morning comes, you should enjoy the day any way you want. He nodded to her. It is a new year.